only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
The National Weather Service has issued a severe thunderstorm warning.
Welcome to the Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast, where prepping doesn't have to be complicated or expensive. Coming to you from a well-defended off-grid compound high in the mountains. Coming to you from his Florida room in Richmond, Virginia. Neither off-grid nor well-defended, unless you count as chickens and cats. Here is your host, Keith.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast. My name is Keith. Episode 41. Today is March the 30th, 2023. Here is an update on Miss Mary Poopins, one of my hens who has that parasitic cochleuentosiosis that cannot pronounce correctly. About a week and a half ago, I isolated her. She started drinking, and I thought she was doing much better. Again, like I said before, put her out with the other hens, and for the first few days, I thought she was on the mend. Well, 3 days ago, it appears that she was getting worse. So I went ahead and brought her back in to isolate her. The next day, I noticed that Lefty, one of the largest hens that I have, was also exhibiting some of the same symptoms as Mary Poopins when she first started to get ill. So I started calling around to several different vets here in the Richmond area to see if anybody saw chickens or poultry vets, whatever you want to call them, farm vets. And I called 9 different veterinarians that sees exotic birds. I guess that's chickens and parrots and cockatoos and whatever they are. Of the 9, and of course, I was able to get in to the very last one I called. Of the 9, the first 8 either didn't have a vet on staff for the next several weeks that saw chickens, didn't have appointments for 2 or 3 weeks out, or just didn't have time to for emergency visit for me to bring Mary Poopins in. I asked one of the vet receptionist ladies, I said, why is it that you can't get an appointment for a cat or a dog for up to 3 weeks? And she said, well, we're just really that busy. Okay, that really wasn't what I asked, and so I called a few more, and I finally got, this is like number 7 or number 8, and I said, ma'am, why is it that you don't have an appointment for 3.5, 4 weeks? And she said, it's because of the insane amount of cats and dogs, especially dogs, that everybody either purchased or adopted during COVID. Several podcasts ago, I mentioned this, that there was a huge influx of these rescue dogs, mostly dogs, but some cats being returned back to the shelters or back to these nonprofits where they originally were adopted from. And I knew this was going to happen. Again, I mentioned that, mom and dad are home. They're working from home. The kids are home from school. And it's, can we get a puppy? And when some of these people have no business having pets at all. And then the same thing has happened with chickens. Tractor Supply and a few other places are completely out of chickens because here comes a family, mom and dad and their 2.2 kids, and it's, let's get a chicken. And they get their little basket and they get the little starter set of the food, the starter this, the starter waterer. And I'm just like, these poor chickens, they don't even have a chance. I would hope that some of them took time, did the research, but I'm not confident that these people are able to understand what they're doing, let alone try to take care of these tiny little animals. So the last veterinarian, it's always the last person you call. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the absolute last one on the list. And I think I spoke to her at about noon. And she's like, oh, absolutely. Can you be in at 5 for our last appointment for the day? I'm like, done. So she, let me get your name and your email address and your address. Let's create a little file. And she goes, what's wrong with your hen? And I gave her, what I diagnosed it over the internet as. And then she said, well, can I have a name for the hen for the file? And I said, well, it's Mary Poopins. And she dropped the phone. And I didn't know if she the phone slipped out of my hand. She was laughing so hard that she dropped the phone. And she comes back on the phone and she's trying to catch her breath. And I'm like, I know it's a silly name. She goes, no, that is a fantastic name. And I said, well, you've probably heard some kind of weird names for pets over the years. She goes, the weirder, the better. I can't even imagine some of the name, but they really like Mary Poopins. So I threw Mary Poopins in a box, and we go to this vet. It's out on Patterson Avenue, west side of Richmond, I guess. Just a little hole-in-the-wall place. The folks there were absolutely fantastic. They took their time. The vet, he actually came in and spoke to me and provided a lot of detail and just blathered on about a bunch of stuff that had nothing to do with my visit there. A really nice guy. Explained the medications, the antibiotics, how to mix them. They even cut me a break on the price because they understand that I was very upset about the chickens, and basically I treat them as pets. So they're like, look, here's a discount for this, a discount for that. You call us if there's any issues whatsoever. I have to isolate Mary Poopins and Lefty away from the other 5 hens. So they're in the garage in what we call the octagon. When we had our RV and we went camping, it's this huge pop-up screened-in porch that has 8 sides, so we call it the octagon, and it's enormous. So it barely fits in this 2.5 car garage, barely fits in the garage. Threw a tarp down, threw a bunch of straw down, threw down a roost, food, water. And so Mary Poopins and Lefty just have the run of the octagon, plenty of room. And the medication, the antibiotics, is a liquid. And if you've never given chickens medication orally, you're in for a treat. So we watched a YouTube video, and they make it look so easy. And of course, I was finally able to get the chickens, to take the medication. Of course, I think I'm hurting the chickens. I got them wrapped up in a towel. I'm apologizing to them. And you have to be careful. And I'm glad I watched this video because their trachea is kind of like in the middle of their mouth. So take your tongue and move your windpipe like underneath your tongue. That's, in a sense, that's what a chicken's mouth is. And you have to be very careful about the amount of the liquid that you put in, that you make sure you don't actually put too much or physically put that liquid down into their trachea, because then they'll drown, they'll asphyxiate, and then you've got a dead chicken, and they'll aspirate, and oh my, can you imagine? So that's why when chickens, they dip their beak and they bring their head up a little bit and they kind of smack their, well, not lips, they smack their beak together, because the water is running down like 2 little like channels in their mouth back down to their esophagus, heading down to their belly. No idea that was a thing. So it took, a 3cc syringe. It took probably 15 minutes. Open up the mouth, hold the head, tiny little squirt. They close their mouth. They smack their little beak together, and then you do it again over and over and over. Well, Mary Poopins, she's really weak, and she didn't put up much of a fight, but Lefty did. Lefty, like I said, is a larger hen, and she is very strong. She put up a heck of a fight, but last night, this morning, and again this evening, I was able to give them their 3 mils of the antibiotics. Took them out into the yard, let them walk around. Of course, Lefty has a fantastic appetite, so she's eating all the grass, and Mary Poopins, not really that impressed. She just kind of hung out in the yard, get her some fresh air and some sun, but they were both eating pretty well. I was impressed with Mary Poopins when I got home. I'm going to be realistic and think that maybe in the next 24 hours, the antibiotics will start taking hold, and it will go ahead and get rid of this parasitic infection she has. Neither of them have been laying eggs, and rightfully so. Cautiously optimistic that Mary Poopins is going to be able to pull through, and maybe first of next week or the middle of next week, I can introduce them both back into the coop and the outside run with the other hens. I have realized that this is, more than partially my fault, because when I go out there, their feed is in the feeder, and I'll throw scratch and, here's some grains and, here's a piece of bread. I'll throw it out onto the ground on the outside run and throw some crushed up eggshells for calcium. I'll throw it out there. And what I'm not really realizing is even if the ground is relatively dry, these parasites, they're still either on the ground or in the ground, and they can be there for weeks or months. So even though I think I'm doing a good job at keeping the run clean and keeping the coop clean, everything is going into a smaller feeder where their treats are going to go. I actually made a little trough out of some leftover pallet wood that I have. So everything is going to stay off the ground. And I'm actually out there every morning at 6 a.m. before the door opens on the coop. And I'm actually cleaning out the outside run, picking up all the poop and picking up all the poop out of the covered run. So just in the event that there's some infected feces still there, I can get it out of there and keep the other 5 hens from getting sick. So there's my chicken story for the week. I thought I had an issue with my freeze dryer. After I did the biscuits and gravy, I did a few other runs, apple slices, bananas, and stuff like that. And I noticed the freezing cycle was taking a really, really long time. Instead of 45 minutes or an hour and a half in the freeze cycle to get it down to 36, 37 below, it was like taking several hours and is adding a tremendous amount of time. And it just didn't make any sense. The pump was working. So I went ahead and dropped a ticket to Harvest Right and asked them if they could, if they had any issue or any troubleshooting hints for me. I went ahead and updated the freeze dryer to the latest software patch that I had not done for, probably several months. It's an old patch. It's been out for a while. I just haven't had a chance to update the firmware or software for the freeze dryer itself. Once I did that, the issue took care of itself. And then, 24 hours later, Harvest Right gets back with me and says, "Hey, it appears you have not updated your freeze dryer. Please update the firmware to the latest, and that should take care of the issue." And in fact, that's exactly what it did. And late last night, I ran 2 trays of ice cream, just vanilla ice cream. I just made scoops. I put scoops onto the trays, and then Food Lion had a sale of they're called the Big Boy ice cream sandwiches, really thick ice cream sandwiches, 2 boxes for $8, and I think there's 6 sandwiches in each. So I cut those into 6 little pieces, 9 little pieces per bar. I put those on 2 trays, put scoops on the other 2 trays, and I put it into the freeze dryer. And then one thing I did that I saw in a video, I went ahead and started the freezing cycle. So it goes through, it cools down the chamber, I close the valve, and I tell it to start freezing. Normally, that's when you would put the trays in, hit the button, it would start freezing. Well, I actually let it freeze for about a half hour, 45 minutes, till it got down to near 0. Went ahead and chopped up the ice cream sandwiches, made the scoops, and as I put them in, I didn't have to worry about it melting onto the trays and starting to get a little runny. So I could take the ice cream sandwiches and put them right into the chamber of the freeze dryer that was already, at 0 or approaching 0. So it gave it a bit of a head start, and I was really, really surprised on how fast the cycle went. So I put them in at 7 p.m. I get up about 6 a.m. this morning, and they're nearly done. I've got to go to work. So I went ahead and added several hours to the freezing process, knowing that, when I got home, it's going to kick over and then drop it down to some crazy temperature, to keep the food from spoiling, I guess, or from gathering moisture. So it went from like 120 degrees, and then it gives it an hour or two. And then when you don't open up the freeze dryer and stop the cycle, it's like, okay, nobody's home. Let's go ahead and drop it down and just kind of hang on, and they'll take it out when they get to it. When I got home, it was at 52 below 0, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So the ice cream is not only freeze dried, it's now completely frozen like a rock. And I opened up the freeze dryer, and of course, me being the knucklehead that I am, I just reached in with my bare hands and I grabbed a stainless steel tray at 46, 48 degrees below 0. You can imagine what happens. My hand sticks to the tray, and I immediately get frostbite. So that was nice. But able to pry my hand off of it, and then grab an oven mitt, and then go ahead and take care of business. Got everything vacuum sealed, so we're good to go. Okay, the real reason, or the main reason, I guess, for this particular podcast, for the last 3 days, like many weeks, I get a few notes together, and I'm like, oh, let me wait till tomorrow's news cycle. Then I'm like, oh, let me wait till the next day's news. And finally, I'm like, look, I just got to report this podcast because every day something bigger and bigger is happening, and I just wanted to get it recorded and get it out there because plenty more is going to happen in the next several days, I'm sure. Something has to give somewhere with all the current events and all the crises, all the crises and all the issues and all the mumbo jumbo that's going on in the world. It's going to come to a head pretty soon, and everybody is being spread so thin that I'm really concerned about the domino effect on what might happen. We all know that for the last 3 years, crime in a lot of our major cities here in the U.S. is absolutely through the roof. Several cities have adopted a policy where if you get arrested, We're just going to bring you down to the police department and you're not going to have to post a bail. Even these are some serious crimes. Oh, don't worry about the bail. Just come to court next month. There are some cities that are no longer prosecuting drug charges, prostitution, shoplifting, and several other types of crimes. They're just not charging people. You are not going to get arrested in certain cities in the United States for possession of drugs, dealing drugs, being a prostitute, soliciting a prostitute, or even shoplifting. I forget the city. There's a city, I don't know if it's San Francisco. They're not going to arrest you or even take a police report for anything less than $1,000 worth of shoplifting. You can go on YouTube, Twitter, any of the social medias. And there are people, they are very brazen. They just walk into these stores with bags and they don't care if their face is on the video or not. And they just sit there and fill their bags full of merchandise and walk out. Not a care in the world. Many times, these are people that have done this multiple times, probably just released from jail with no bond, and they continue to commit these crimes. And in that same vein, in Portland, Oregon, Walmart is closing 2 stores because of crime. Cracker Barrel, they're also closing some stores. Nike in Seattle and Portland have actually asked for assistance from the local government, the mayor, saying, hey, we'd like to open our store again, but we can't because every time we open the store, people come in and grab our shoes and the police won't take the report. And if they do, they're not prosecuting these shoplifters. Starbucks has closed 16 stores and they're closing more again because of the level of crime. These are all in our major cities. And let's look. Let me just break it down. The only people that this is going to affect are the people that live in those neighborhoods. These are minority neighborhoods for the most part. This is going to affect them. So the law-abiding people that get their coffee at Starbucks, that like to eat at Cracker Barrel, that go to their neighborhood Walmart, that maybe buy a pair of Nikes every once in a while, these are the people that are going to suffer. The criminals, they're just going to go a little farther out and they're going to find another store to shoplift from. Walgreens, 19 stores in San Francisco have been closed. Walgreens has closed 19 of their drugstores, pharmacies, whatever you want to call them. Now, I don't know how many they have in total, but they're closing 19. That has to be, I don't know, a quarter, 10, 20, 30% of all the Walgreens in San Francisco, but they're being closed. So that's 19 pharmacies that people can't go get their prescriptions filled. That's 19 drugstores that people can't get their, shampoo, gift cards, all the different little personal items that you can get at a Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, that sort of thing. So now the Walgreens that the law-abiding citizens used to walk to, take a taxi, take an Uber, take the city bus to, they're not going to be there. The criminals, if they want to continue shoplifting and holding up the pharmacy and stealing medication, they're just going to go across the street to the CVS, or they're going to find the next pharmacy closer to them and they're going to go ahead and rob that one. And absolutely insane. So, and I've said this before, it's situations like this that make people very nervous. If you live in the suburbs, is this coming your way? If they close all the Walgreens in the inner city or the major metropolitan area, where are the criminals going to go? Where are they going to go next to loot or shoplift from a Walmart, a Cracker Barrel, or whatever it happens to be? What stores are they going to rob? Because all the stores that they have been robbing and shoplifting from the past are now closed. The crime, in my opinion, is just going to spread out further and further. The cities, and some of these cities are in bad shape to begin with, they're going to become even more derelict, even more run down. New York City, homicides are through the roof. People are leaving by the truckloads. Was it in New York City? You can't even get a U-Haul because there's all these one-way rentals. Everybody's going to Texas, to Florida. They're getting the heck out of New York, and rightfully so. So how do you govern, if you're the mayor of New York, how do you govern a city where everybody's leaving? How do you govern a city when rent is $2,000 and $3,000 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment? If there's nobody there that you can rent to, if there's nobody there to go to the stores, if there's nobody there to pay the taxes, how does a city like that survive? It makes no sense to me. Instead of getting tough on crime and giving longer sentences and a higher bail, instead of keeping the bad guys in jail so they don't commit other crimes, or at least have the opportunity to commit other crimes, they're doing the exact opposite. I think this is by design. I think this is on purpose to, I guess, kind of break the system, or to get to, the U.S. economy, to get it to a point where it's already fragile enough as it is, and it's just another, I guess, a weight on everybody's shoulders, and eventually something's got to give. There's going to be a tipping point. You have the riots in France, the labor activity in Germany and France. They've been rioting there for at least a couple weeks. In Germany, what was the airline? The airline folks went on strike. Public transportation went on strike a few days ago. These are things that will snowball, and it's all done on purpose. This just isn't random. I think chaos is being interjected into all of these countries, all of these economies for a reason, to see what finally breaks. And when it comes to the U.S. dollar, there are several countries, there's 23 countries, which make up about 60% of the world's GDP, gross domestic product, that are considering dropping the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. Now, the dollar overseas is in good shape. The dollar here is an absolute disaster. But it's the world's reserve currency, in that there's a lot of confidence that the world's economy have in the U.S. dollar. Well, that's quickly going away. And I haven't seen anything other than the Fed's raising interest rates. I haven't seen anything to help, I guess, bolster the U.S. dollar, on the world scene, to try to talk to these countries to say, well, let's just pump the brakes for a second. Let's not go running off Saudi Arabia and exchange the dollar for the Chinese yuan, yuan. So Russia, China, India, Germany, and France, and United Kingdom, they're considering not using the dollar as a reserve currency. That could certainly have catastrophic effects. Let me get my mouth words out. That can certainly have the potential to create catastrophic effects here when our confidence in the dollar and with inflation is eroding. What happens when the world's like, we're really not going to need your dollars anymore to invest in other industry or whatever it happens to be? That's a lot of money. That's a lot of currency that's not being put to use. And this one article says, once the new system is in place, the U.S. dollar will not be needed in these countries, and a new reserve currency will come into being. Now, here's what I think is going to happen. Again, I think this is by design. I don't think this is, oh my gosh, it just catches everybody completely by surprise. I think this is done on purpose, and I think very soon, and some countries have started to go with this. Part of Australia has already going to this. They're going to trial this. It's going to be digital currency. So everything will be online. Everything will be through a debit card. You won't have physical currency in your hand. Here's the pitfall. If all your money is digital, and then the digital ID it goes hand in hand with digital currency. And a lot of people are like, oh, a digital ID, isn't that neat? All my stuff will be on a computer. I won't need to carry a wallet. I'll just stick my palm up on glass, or I'll stick my eye into a retina scan, and I can get into a building, or I can get into the bank. If all of your money is controlled by the government and it's digital, if the government doesn't like what you're doing, they don't like what you're saying, they don't like what you're posting online, guess what? Guess what happens when you go to open up your app to see how much digital currency, which is just really nothing tangible, and I talked about that a few podcasts ago, the money that you have in the bank is just a bunch of numbers. If you have $10,000 in the bank, there's not a little envelope with your name on it that says, here's Mike's $10,000, and Mike's going to invest $500 of it. Oh, somebody go in the back and open up Mike's envelope and get out $500 because he wants to invest it in whatever, Apple or Tesla. Not how that works. You're going to open up your little app and be like, well, I'm going to go to the grocery store. Wait a second, it's locked. What's this about? What do you mean I can't? Oh, please call this number. Well, Mr. Jones, we really don't appreciate what you said online about X, Y, and Z. We're going to have a talk. So unless you take down those posts, unless you, post a video apology, and I'm just making stuff up, I don't think you're going to be able to have access to your money. Well, then you can't buy food. Then you can't pay your mortgage or your rent. And that comes along with a social credit score, which China already has. Talked about that before. So it's a very slippery slope. And if there is a digital currency here and there's a digital currency in other countries, what keeps the world from having one digital currency? The EU obviously has the euro. All the countries that make up the EU, you travel from country to country. There is no border in a sense. You take a car, you take the train from Germany into France. You don't have to stop at the border and show your passport. You're a member of the EU, so you just keep on going. So you pay with things in euro in Germany and in France and in other countries in the EU. They don't have their own currency. So that makes me very nervous. Social credit, digital currency. I mean, what could possibly go wrong when you don't have access to your money and you can't physically hold the $20 bill? You can't go to the store and pay your groceries with the $20 bill. You take your phone, and if you've been good and have done what the government wants you to do, you can turn your phone over, bloop, and you can pay for your groceries. And then $18 of that $20 comes out of your virtual account. And then the government decides basically how you can spend your money. They will track how you spend your money. They will track where you spend your money, how often and how much, which is basically done now when you use your debit card or your credit card. If you use cash, not as easy to track. But your debit card, I went to Home Depot and bought $200 worth of lumber. I went to Mike's gun shop and bought a handgun and 200 rounds of ammunition. Well, let's hope that whatever, the U.S. government or wherever you happen to live, let's hope that they approve of that, because if they don't approve of that, someone may come knocking at your door. You may find that your account has been locked, and it just really gets down to, personal freedom and being able to have the ability to freely travel and do what you want to do. I'll close with this. There's a lot of disinformation out there, and that's very well documented. A lot of distractions. Reference to the shooting at the Christian school in Nashville, I cannot believe the amount of time that people are wasting on all this disinformation about this particular event. And I'll talk about this one. There's tons of examples of this. I read a post online where someone is actually developing a conspiracy theory about the shoes that the shooter was wearing. Apparently they zoomed into a video and it's a Nike swoosh. But then in the other shot with the person walking down the hall, it looks like they're Pumas. And then someone says they're photoshopped and they're different colors. And then from there, it just perpetuates itself. And then some guy says when they took a still of the body cam footage of the police officer that shot and killed the shooter, they said, look, there's no blood. And they're like, false flag, never happened, completely made up like in a Hollywood movie set. And people are agreeing and people are commenting on this. I'm like, you people are so simple-minded that you can't think about something critically. You're watching too many movies. Let me tell you how blood works in the human body. I'm not a doctor, but I'm pretty sure your heart pumps blood through your body. If your heart stops, guess what? The blood stops flowing. As a retired cop, I have been to more homicides, suicides, shootouts, hangings than I ever want to think about. I can count on two hands the number of crime scenes that I've been to when there was blood from a suicide or a homicide. Now, gravity will certainly allow blood to flow from the body, but if you shoot yourself and you fall to the ground, there's not a big pool of blood that comes oozing out, like for the cinematic effect in some movie, the camera pans away at the end, and there's a big pool of blood coming out of the bad guy's head or whatever it happens to be. That's just for theatrical effects. You stop the heart, you stop the blood. So the shooter had body armor on. So the officer had a long gun, and I don't know where the bad guy, bad gal, whatever was shot, but assuming the officer went center mass, and I think the shooter was shot in the back, went through the body armor and probably died very quickly. I don't know if there was a headshot or not. Now, you're not going to see a big pool of blood like the movies. So someone does not see a pool of blood underneath the shooter, and it's a false flag. It's a conspiracy. It didn't happen, just like 9/11 didn't happen. What I find absolutely amazing is people fall for this So instead of concentrating on the shooter and why they did what they did, and regardless of what you think about gun laws, what you need to do and what we need to do to make sure this doesn't happen again at another school, we're going to run around talking about, is it a Nike? Is it a Puma? The shoes change colors. You see when they went to that it's two different people because the hat's on the wrong way. I'm like, you people need to get a life. There's enough crazy stuff, true crazy stuff going on in the world that you don't need to sit here and make stuff up. Part of me thinks these people do it on purpose to keep everybody distracted from what might be the real issues. I understand a lot of people don't trust the government, and I'm kind of there with you in certain aspects, but bad people do bad things, and sometimes it's just as simple as that. Now, situations like this, the state of the world as it is in now, makes me happy, or makes me glad that I have been prepping for as long as I have been prepping. It's not really validation, because I wish the world was all lollipops and rainbows, but I know it's not. And it would be great if I never had to put my preps to use. But I think we've turned a corner, and I don't think we're coming back, folks. I hate to be Mr. Doom and Gloom, but I think, you hear the expression, we're at the edge of the abyss. I think we've gone over the abyss and we don't have a parachute. It's just a matter of how far we fall until we hit the bottom. What happens at the bottom is anybody's guess. But I think it puts me in a better frame of mind knowing that I've established the preps that I have. Oh, by the way, that ice cream is fantastic. I had some. I meant to say that earlier. That freeze-dried ice cream is fantastic. I know this. If the world goes to hell in a handbasket and the poop hits the fan, I've got freeze-dried Skittles and freeze-dried ice cream for everybody. Come to my house. We're just going to have a heck of a time with Skittles. We'll drop them in our little bottles of vodka, and then we'll just, drink vodka and eat freeze-dried ice cream and watch the world burn, or whatever it happens to be. But it brings me some satisfaction knowing that I've got the preps. If they're needed, they're there. I've got them, and I guess it makes me less anxious. So when I read a crappy headline and I see things that are going on, I'm thinking, well, if they close my Cracker Barrel or they close my Walmart, I just have to travel a little further. But push comes to shove, I've got my corn, I've got my green beans, I've got my water, and all that good stuff. But anyway, folks, again, on the Twitter, prep_podcast, or you can always search Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast, practicalpreppodcast@gmail.com. And I promise, I keep saying this, but I promise next time I'm going to answer an email, and it has to do with my former career as a police officer. And somebody asked if I had a funny story I could tell about some of my encounters and cases and traffic stops as a police officer that was a little odd or a little funny, and I actually have more than I can count. But anyway, so next time I'm going to make a note. At the end, I'll answer that email, and I'll give you guys a funny little story. It may become a regular thing of the podcast. But anyway, folks, thanks for hanging out. Again, the podcast grows every week. I got new folks checking in from new cities, new countries. I really appreciate it. Spread the word, like the professional voiceover guy will say here in a few minutes. Do a like and a follow. Tell your friends, wake the neighbors, let them know there's a really cool podcast out there. And again, folks, as always, and especially with the shit show of a society we have going on now, please be careful out there, take care of one another, and until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Common Sense Practical Prepper Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. While you're at it, help spread the word by leaving a rating and review.